the regular Building Board of Appeals meeting for July 21st, 2022. Roll call.
Paul Darling,
Here.
Robert Hart,
Here.
Hugh Fleck, absent. David Arnstor,
Here.
Kevin Cox.
Here.
For staff, we have Glenn Dempsey,
Here.
Michael Redmond,
Here.
John Reiser,
Here.
myself, Deborah Williams. Did I call Bob Hart?
Yes.
Okay,
I'm still here.
we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. We have a quorum. Public commentary. Is there anybody here for public commentary? Let's see. Any here for public commentary?
I have no one in the waiting room.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve.
A second. Motion and support. Those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Agenda passes. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes for the June 21st, 2021 meeting. Now we have those in our packet. Is there any comment on those? If not, we can have a motion to approve them.
Move to approve the minutes.
A second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those are approved. Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from the last month's meeting of June 16th, 2022. Is there any comments on those? If not, can we have a motion?
Move to approve the June 16, 2022 meeting minutes.
Second. Those in favor?
Aye.
That passes. Next item on the agenda is appeals, actions, and show cause hearings. And the first item on the agenda of that is appeal BBA 22-0202 at variance appeal for 616 East Washington Street, Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we'll have the order of this is we'll have a staff report, and then we'll have the applicant come up and make a presentation about their appeal, and then we'll give an opportunity for the staff to comment on that, and then it'll go to the board for comments. And
Come back to me, then go to the board for questions and formation of it.
so after the board has comments, it'll go back to Glenn again, back to staff. And then we'll have a motion, and then we'll vote. And for a motion to pass, we need a majority, so that will be 3 out of the 4 board members present. So, Glenn, do you want to make your presentation first, or you want to have the application come up and make his presentation first? You want to do your,
Do I give a staff report?
okay.
So I'd like to go over a little bit of the background on the application and then the recommendation from staff. This is a property at 616 East Washington, is in process of constructing a 19-story building which will surround 3 sides of the screen room for the Michigan Theater. The screen room, as it will continue to exist, is on the property of 616 East Washington and adjoining to the 19-story building. The applicant is requesting the allowance of a single exit leaving the screen room, entering the Michigan Theater, and exiting through the Michigan lobby. The applicant's intent is to create a 3-hour firewall separation, to separate the Michigan Theater from the 19-story building and the screen room. The hope of the applicant is to keep the screen room for the Michigan Theater open and available to the public through the construction process, until which time proper exiting can be provided. Staff recommends, under recommendation, staff recommends this application be denied as it does not meet the standards for approval. The code has not been misinterpreted. Additional definitions and code sections have been provided that will reference that You can also see that in the documentation on the denial that was provided back to Scott Bowers, at Scott Bowers and Associates, it identifies the requirements for an exit passageway, a horizontal exit, and other code sections that may be applicable. Staff believes that, or I believe that, the interpretation has not been misinterpreted, and that the quantity of applicants and the exiting is not proper to allow this space to be continued and used until proper exiting is in place. And that would be until either the exits were in place or the construction was completed. Thank you.
All right, is the applicant here? You can come up. Is there a sign-in form there still, Deborah? Just having them sign in and make a statement about their appeal.
Hello. I'm Laura Eder with ESG Architects. We're the architect of the high-rise tower. Scott Bowers is here with me, and Brad Moore. Do you have the
We can do it after.
presentation after?
Oh, you weren't ready for the presentation?
No, I think, yeah.
Okay.
So if that's all right, I'll go through the presentation and just kind of talk about what we're thinking through the process here. This is gonna be show up on here. All right. So we're talking about temporary egress out of the Michigan Theater screening room during the construction of the 19-story tower at 616 Washington. You can go to the next slide. So this is an aerial view of the existing condition prior to the start of construction. The small residential units to the north have been demolished at this point, and the egress was through those residential lots through an easement. That easement is now vacated because we have put the screening room now on the 616 parcel. It used to be its own parcel mid-block. So it used to be a property line on all four sides of this building until it was resurveyed. The building existing right now is type 3B construction, and all exits currently exit across easements to get to the public way. Next slide. So the existing exits are to the north. Out of the two doors shown, there's one within the screening room and one within the screening room kind of foyer lobby. There's an existing 3-hour wall shown in red that that divides the screening room from the corridor that takes you to the Michigan Theater. And Glenn and Scott have talked about the addition of a new 3-hour firewall on the property line. So there's a 3-hour wall of the Michigan Theater. There's not one on the 616 property. So we will be constructing this new orange line prior to allowing 49 occupants per this request. So that wall will be installed prior to the start of these 49 occupants, one exit discussion that we're talking about today. Next slide, please. So that is a section showing the auditorium on the right-hand side with that screening, or with that corridor leading over to the Michigan Theater. Those 3-hour walls go to the roof. In a 3B type construction, the roof is unrated, just for knowledge. Next slide, please. So this is the potential exiting plan that we're showing. So we would have 49 occupants exiting the screening room into the Michigan Theater lobby and exiting through the lobby, while the 616 19-story tower is under construction. This would be for approximately 180 days until we pour the 5th level of concrete, and it is deemed safe for occupants in the Michigan Theater screening room to exit across this site. We're a little over an acre on the entire, or a little over half an acre on the entire site, and it's not really feasible to phase the construction to do one half and then the other half of this concrete tower to kind of try to keep some exiting here. So on the next slide. So once we are through that 5th floor of construction, we'll have various routes through the construction site to be maintained per section 3306 of the Michigan Building Code that protects pedestrians to get to the public right-of-way. And then the next slide is the finalized version of exiting, where we will be exiting the existing screening room through the 616 East Washington Street building, since it is on that block. So it will go into exit passageways and exit 2 exits to the public right-of-way. Next section, or next slide. This is 2 sections through the existing screening room. There is no construction going over the screening room. We will be adjacent vertically with 3-hour walls, but there is nothing that's happening on top of this. Screening room during construction. Next slide. This is the plan that was provided with the application to go through the temp exiting plan. So from the, I can't even read this, from the circle in the auditorium, there's a pink route and a light blue route that gets you within 75 feet of that 3-hour corridor, which is kind of called an exit passageway in this sense. So you'd have a safe exiting out of the screening room into a 3-hour rated enclosure. Then you would hit the Michigan Theater doors, which will be in a 3-hour firewall, and then you have less than 75 feet to the exit, and you can clearly see the exit of the screening room as you go through those double doors into the Michigan Theater lobby. Again, this is a temporary exiting plan during construction. We would like it to remain under 180 days, but with the way construction happens, the market, we can't really commit to exactly that number, but it would be around 180 days. Next slide. So the schedule of construction, next slide. So right now, we have 2 exits onto the 616 property out of the screening room. That will close when the screening room is closed to do the construction of the new 3-hour firewall on the south facade. That'll take us to the end of the year. Then once that 3-hour wall is constructed, we would like to open the screening room to 49 occupants, exiting through the Michigan Theater for approximately 180 days. Then we move into stage 4, which is exiting out the 616 property as it's safe, and as it's not, still keep that exit back through the Michigan Theater, which would be the duration of the project. And then stage 5, the 2 exits, which would be completion of the project that would exit onto the 616 property out of the screening room. Next slide. Occupancy load. So right now there is 257 total occupants based on the existing drawings of the screening room. So if you go back to the permittable drawings when the screening room was built, they're saying that the occupancy was 257. We would like to post an occupancy of 49. That does not allow more than 49 occupants within the screening room building at one time. This would be screened, electronic ticket sales, staff would be educated to understand this, and I believe Russ Collins with the Michigan Theater has sent 2 letters to the board stating that they would be on top of this 49 occupants, whether it's removing seats, covering seats, kind of whatever the Building Board of Appeals would feel comfortable with to make sure that they can't fill the seating that's currently in there. I think right now it's somewhere around 190 seats that are actually in the space. Next slide. Exit passageway. So we're calling this an exit passageway through the 3-hour corridor to kind of limit that 75 feet of common path of travel for one exit. So we're having 2 exits out of the screening room itself into this 3-hour rated exit passageway, and then that termination is supposed to take you to the public way. It does take you through the Michigan Theater into another building that the Michigan Theater lobby is sprinklered now. So the Michigan Theater is not, but the lobby is. And then that would take you directly out. If you go to the next slide, exit travel distance. So those are the exit doors that you would see once you came out of the screening room, and those are the doors that you would come into the screening room through, is the ones on the right-hand side. And the travel distance for an A occupancy with a sprinkler system is 250 feet, and those dashed lines that we're showing add up to 141 to 211. So depending upon which way you went, those are the total numbers. Next slide, safeguards during construction. So Chapter 33 says maintenance of means of egress. There is an exception during construction that if the existing means of egress do not need to be maintained where an approved temporary means of egress and facilities are provided. And that's basically what we're trying to ask here is, for a temporary use during construction, can we provide this, this exiting? It's an interesting situation since it is crossing a property line, but both buildings are owned and managed by the Michigan Theater. Next slide. And this is a copy of the letter sent from Russ Collins, just stating support from the Michigan Theater. Basically, the idea is that we don't want to close the Michigan Theater screening room for 2 years, so, or even a year, to keep the vitality of the Michigan Theater going for the city. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Glenn, do you have any other further comments?
I'd like to make a couple comments in response to the appeal and what's happening here with the request. There are 3 standards for approval. One is the true intent of the code or the rules governing construction have been incorrectly interpreted, of which this is the basis that the applicant is appealing the process. The provisions of the code do not apply, and an equal or better form of construction is proposed. With their 3-hour corridor that they're providing, it does not take it to an exit, it takes it into another space that's across the property line into another building. While it's suppressed, the theater area, the screen room, is not suppressed. The distances that would be measured would be the total distance when interpreting distance, and so while you're allowed, with a suppressed building, you're allowed a certain distance. In this case, that screen room is not suppressed, so it does not fall into the same ramifications or allowances for distances of travel. I would like the board to keep that in mind. The additional thing is the occupant load. Nothing's been proposed with the occupant load of how they're going to limit, other than just now removal of seats and allowances. We take a lot of things in consideration for occupant loads, additional space, standing. We try to be consistent with those approaches, and I believe the space is far greater than just an applicable sign being put up to indicate the occupant load. I guess one additional thing to add, jumping back to the passageways and horizontal exit. Horizontal exits are great, but they're not the first required exit. And while they have this 3-hour separation in the corridor, they're going into another building. The horizontal exit can't be the only exit. The passageway is the exit that is required, and it goes to an exit, not into another building. So passageway exit is allowed if it goes to the exterior. I've provided definitions, code sections, and if you have questions, please feel free to ask me. Thank you.
Does the board have questions for the applicant?
So the screening room is not sprinklered. The Michigan Theater lobby is sprinklered, but the main theater itself is not sprinklered? Is that?
So currently, the Michigan Theater screening room is sprinklered.
Oh, it is.
It will need to be detached during construction because we're not allowed to connect across the property line. which currently is being served out of the Cadillac building, which will be demolished. So when that building gets demolished, and originally we wanted to tie it into the Michigan Theater fire sprinkler system, that's part of the lobby, but that crosses a property line, which is not part of the code that we can, so that would be another reason we'd be here if we were gonna try to tie it into that. So Glenn is not wrong in the sense that it will not be sprinklered during this temporary means of egress, but it is currently sprinklered. And will be sprinklered off of the tower once the tower is built.
And so is there a fire alarm or annunciation system in the
This is
screening room?
Scott's part.
Yes, we do have a fire alarm. We have a new one being installed as well.
There's not a temporary means of hooking up the fire suppression system so that the room can remain sprinkled?
We'd have to come back from the Michigan Theater, and I don't believe that was a choice. But there could be a possibility of doing it. It's just that all the properties are being under construction except for the Michigan Theater.
Right.
And in the end, it needs to come from the 616 building because that's the property it's on.
So, again, there isn't a fire alarm system for the screening room?
There is a fire alarm system for the screening room.
Is there an annunciation system?
Yes, there is.
So an announcement can be made
Correct.
inside that room?
Yes.
And that's within the, where is that within the, not within the theater building, it's within the sixth, it's within the building itself, that alarm system and notification
The
system?
alarm system's actually out of the Michigan Theater.
So those alarm systems are connected to each other, but not the fire suppression system, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an odd situation.
Yeah.
Is there, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Is there can there not be a constructed temporary means of egress out of the room through the construction site with scaffold? I mean, I know OSHA's got a ton of requirements to go through, but is there nothing that can be constructed to go across the construction site?
We are going to construct something, but the construction company won't be able to do it until the 5th floor when they're out of the way. So that's the problem that we're having. So they won't be complete enough to be able to do that because everything's under construction there. But once the 5th floor goes on, they'll have temporary egress through the building and scaffolding per code.
And that'll be emergency exit only, I assume.
Emergency exit only, yes.
And that won't be until November?
180 days roughly.
Mhm.
Where we are constructing a new door and a new exit way out into the lobby from the screening room to that exit passageway, which is directly across the door to the lobby.
Glenn, would it make a difference if, if the continuation of the egress path, that dotted green line that leads to the exterior, if that was...
Can you, I can't hear you, can you?
Oh, sorry. Would it make a difference if the dotted green line that's shown on the egress plan was in an enclosed or dedicated fire-rated corridor?
If it went to the exterior, all from the start to the finish?
Well,
Yes, that's the whole idea. And you're saying, which line are you indicating, though?
So on the part plan that shows all the different colored means of egress out of the screening room, the final leg is a dotted green line that leads to the exterior, and it's got a hatched area. My question is, If that hatched area was a dedicated, fire-rated, enclosed tunnel, would that make a difference?
I'm not sure if I'm looking at the right picture.
This one, I think, if they enclose this in a horizontal axis enclosed, that'd be,
3 pages from the
If
end.
that was somehow constructed.
that's the historic theater though, that's the historic lobby right there. Yeah.
Double height space, isn't
It is, but it's,
And where does it start? It comes around?
It picks up the 3-hour rated corridor that they were constructing.
Yeah, so you're also then affecting the other part of the mission theater.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that they use the whole thing.
Hey, folks, if you're going to deliberate or talk, it should be on the record.
Yes.
They have the,
It's on there. I'm just showing, you didn't see the diagram, so I'm just showing you.
no, but there was discussion that, I don't know that these folks.
we can hear you, yeah.
Thank you. We'll revisit that so everybody can hear. So if there was a proper exit passageway, the current passageway is not according to the code requirements. If there was a proper code-defined passageway that met those requirements to the exterior, yes, that would meet the one exit. The other part of it is the occupant load, we would require a second exit.
At
Because of-
49, you wouldn't need 2 though, right? At 49, you gotta have 1 exit.
49 requires one, and it's supposed to be an exit passageway that goes from
To 2
the
points.
exiting right, or to the exit. The horizontal exit, which is what they're proposing, crossing the building property line, it's not allowed by itself. It still has to have an exit that goes to the exterior. So whether you make the determination that there are 49 applicants under certain requirements, it has to be a passageway that goes to the exterior, to the exit. I provided the definition for you to look at also.
And just one thing to add to this too is the interesting scenario between these two buildings. So we came to you a year and a half ago to ask for this door between the theater and the screening room. You're not allowed to have a door on a property line. So this door is already kind of a convoluted code issue here, because technically you shouldn't be entering in the Michigan Theater and crossing the screening room, crossing this threshold to go into the screening room to begin with, because the screening room should be on the Michigan Theater property. So if that was the case, then this building would be part of the same building. You wouldn't have this scenario. So the egress would all want to go that direction. The problem is that's not how this was built and how this was put together. This screening room is on a completely separate property, which is why we're building a 19-story tower around it.
If I might comment on that. It is a convoluted, it's been approved for those extra doors allowing passage to and from. However, again, a passageway has to go to the exterior. It shouldn't enter into another lobby. It should go to the outside. These are safety restrictions that allow for exiting, and in a temporary situation with construction going around, I myself do not believe it is safe.
It's also noted that an exit passageway only requires a minimum of a 1-hour rating, and this would have a 3-hour rating. So we are a more substantial rating in this passageway. Now it is going to send you into a building instead of directly to the exterior, as Glenn has noted. But once you get into that corridor, you're within a 3-hour rating on either end with the doors protected once you come out of that auditorium. And again, we're asking for this to be a temporary means of egress. This is not something that we would want the board to consider for long-term. This is more during construction for the safety of the occupants, because we don't feel like going across the construction site would be safe. It's also worth noting that you're only entering the Michigan Theater screening room through the Michigan Theater. So in the event of an emergency, it is noted that most people want to go the way they came in. And so that's just for the record, the only way into the screening room from a purchase ticket is through the Michigan Theater entrance. Thanks.
If I might add, Glenn Dempsey, building official, one additional comment. While even they indicated earlier that construction does run into hurdles and issues that come up that may drag the process on, this could end up being a year of which we don't have proper egress. It might not be 6 months, it may be a year, it may be 7 months. That's hard to figure out as complications run throughout a construction process.
If we put a condition on there for duration, if it went past that, they would lose occupancy of that space or have to come back for another variance or something. I don't know if there was, not that there were.
If stipulations were put in place and they exceeded the stipulations, that would be an enforcement that we'd have to go forward with.
I have a question for you, Glenn. I know most corridors require 2 means of egress. Is an exit passageway only required to have 1 means of egress? You're entering from one end and exit at the other, so you wouldn't need to have a second way out? Like a corridor, you typically has 2 stairways and you exit at each end, or you have too long of a dead end.
So there are allowances for one exit situations. When you get into occupant loads, that sort of triggers the second exit.
Or the space, but a corridor itself typically always has 2.
It allows, if it's a one exit, that passageway allows you to exit one exit.
Yeah, so basically you're not having anything else, so it's one exit because nothing
Yeah.
else is,
But it is supposed to go to an exit,
yeah.
not into a lobby.
And then a horizontal exit, I know buildings can have horizontal exits where you exit in an area of refuge. In a way, they're treating that lobby like an area of refuge where you're going through a firewall into a separate safe space. Are those doors on holdovers between the two, and those would close if the fire alarm went off? Then that would give you that safe area?
Correct.
Yes, those doors are specifically tied to the fire alarm. So they would close if the fire alarm went off in either building eventually.
Mhm.
The doors that go into the screening room where your dotted line's going across?
The double doors,
Yeah, the double doors.
and they'll be rated for 3 hours.
And it looks like on the site plan, well, I guess you can't connect there, so you have too much construction going on there, but you can't get from your building over to toward the west where there's currently something goes back out to Liberty Street. You can't get there with over.
No, we're dealing with a lot of foundational issues that I think is going to take quite a bit of time along the existing building. We don't really want to incur any damage on the Michigan Theater, so there's quite a bit of foundation work that goes there.
Yeah.
And it happens all the way around the building. And it's just kind of cost
Yeah.
imperative to stop construction on half of it and then mobilize that team again, because it's such a small site.
What was early conversation with the building department when they went through the planning phase of all this, of, hey, you're gonna be blocking this off? Was this not really talked about or thought about? Was it brought to attention? Is this like a last minute, oh, hey, this is gonna happen? You know what I mean? Like, so through the building, getting it approved and everything, was there ever a letter sent out saying, you're
Sequencing.
blocking these exits, something has to happen, you have to provide a means of egress for this other business to stay in business? Because right now, the construction of this building is gonna impact a business to require, it's a movie theater. So, you know, like, you have to shut down this entire room, so their business is gonna be impacted by this. Was it ever discussed with the construction company saying, or the planning, whoever owners, saying you have to do something about this?
So this is a very complicated building. It's hard pressed to see this in many jurisdictions across the country. you've got really 3 buildings that are affecting this construction. Very difficult. While certain things are addressed, we didn't have specifics on what they're going through now. They went through a recent Board of Appeals to get some exits allowed and so forth, and the doors that are allowing other uses, other amenity uses, such as bathrooms, being located into a 3rd building. So it's a very complicated building. We don't have anything specific that we discussed on one exit going through. This is in code eyes, a safety issue, and while, we wouldn't want to put a business out of business,
Right.
we have, I believe, higher concerns when it comes to safety of the public. And that's why the codes have been developed for minimum, these are minimum codes. So that's what you have to keep in mind in this appeal process.
And from our perspective, when we went through the zoning for the height and kind of site planning for this, we did talk about closing the theater and/or exiting through the construction site. And as we've moved forward through design, and we're basically in for permit drawings and moving forward, it's just deemed really not feasible to go through the construction site. And the Michigan Theater feels that it's not acceptable to close. So we're kind of in this rock and a hard place.
And I'm sorry, you work for
I work for ESG Architects, who's doing the high-rise
the
tower.
high-rise.
And Scott Bowers is the architect for the Michigan Theater
Okay.
and screening room.
And you guys have talked about he's the architect. So, it's just hard because you guys are closing down a business. And it's a theater just coming off of COVID. That they're one of the worst people that were impacted during all of COVID. And now, really, if we vote no to this, they have to close down half their business so that you guys can do your thing. And a year later, maybe, they can go back to business as normal.
That's correct.
What are the operating hours for the screening room?
So the operating hours of the screening room will not collide with the operating hours of the construction site. So they will not operate the screening room when construction is going on. So we have discussed this with the construction team and Russ Collins with the Michigan Theater. They will operate the screening room at nights and weekends when the construction is not taking place.
So it's a limited number of hours during the week. And presumably a limited number, but longer hours during the weekend. So I have a question for the fire department. Could this all be somehow mitigated if there was a fire watch installed?
Well, a fire watch by definition is for a system that's impaired. So I don't want to compare apples to oranges in that sense, because the fire watch is really either a fire suppression system that is down, a sprinkler system shut down, fire pump shut down, or fire alarm system shut down, where a human actually becomes that detection to get people out. That's not really the issue here. The issue here is still an occupant load and egress issues,
Well, I
which are
guess
both life safety issues in fire code.
I understand. I understand.
So, I mean, I don't understand how a fire watch would help out the scenario for this.
Well, because the 2 letters indicated that they were going to leave it to staff to take the necessary precautions to guarantee, or to ensure safety. So I'm asking whether, and since the suppression system is going to be shut down during construction.
With the system being shut down, and if the building's occupied, they're going to have to be on fire watch anyways. That's going to be implied, that
So
if the building's occupied, they go on fire watch for it. But we're still at a position where that's like having ushers or trying to get people out. The ushers are still going to be taking them through a egress system that's not code compliant.
believe this is one of the questions that Glenn asked me before, but I believe the construction type and the size of this building, screening room only, doesn't require fire suppression. So that's why we were able to unhook it, leave it alone until we got 616 up and running.
That's not helping. Well, I guess I'd like to ask one more time. If the 3-hour corridor that they're creating within the screening room is continued out to an exterior exit in an enclosed egress tunnel, which would be an extension of the egress passageway, would that be feasible as a code, for code compliance?
If it were a proper passageway,
Excuse me?
if it were a proper code compliant passageway and it
Yes.
went to the exterior,
Yes.
yes, but nothing's been proposed as such for us to look at. This was a proposal that, you know, my interpretation or the building department's interpretation was incorrect.
Oh, okay, but that's what I wanted. You answered my question. Good. Is that possible?
I don't believe so. So the stairs that go to the second floor of the Michigan Theater are on the right-hand side of that plan, kind of on the right side of that dashed green line, and the Michigan Theater entrance for the first floor is on the left-hand side. So people would have to enter the Michigan Theater with a divider and go either direction. So we'd be limiting the egress out of the Michigan Theater exits. So I don't believe that would be possible to create a
Does
corridor
the stair
through
to the
there.
balcony come up? Would do that, the interrupt with the stair to the balcony would be impacted by a horizontal exit there, or that enclosure?
It could be. The space is pretty tall, so I think you could create a tunnel that comes out of those doors.
Yeah.
The challenge is you've got the stairs coming down on one side, and you've got the entrance to the other stairs on the
Yeah.
other side, and you've got the majority of your exits kind of on that.
Yeah.
I feel like you'd have to come into the Michigan Theater and go in one door or the other door, whether you were upstairs or downstairs, and I think that would, it would be challenging. You can see those stairs on the, actually, you may not be able to see those stairs on any of the drawings. Yes, on the,
There's a break line on the plan that's what's difficult to tell what the dimension that you're talking about is.
yeah, can you go back to page 5?
In your presentation?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, so you can see in the presentation where it says 630 East Washington Street, you can see that staircase. And then the doors that go into the Michigan Theater auditorium. And I hope everybody has their glasses.
So is 630 under construction, East Washington under construction, or is that not under construction yet? Could you exit sooner?
It is currently under construction. We're up to the second floor right now. It is planned to be complete and the restroom is operational before they tear down the Cadillac building. So we will have fire suppression, occupancy exiting from that building until the restrooms are complete, and then the restrooms in the 630 East Washington building will be open. So that would be also another caveat to this corridor through there, is you couldn't get to the restrooms without going back outside.
Because your other variance is approval to go through the restroom as an exit, right? Yeah, so you have that
Yes,
variance.
so yeah, the exit from that building goes through the restrooms. But you're not exiting across buildings in the final.
And that's not to the point of construction-wise you can get through there now. You couldn't make temporary construction through that.
You would be able to go through that, so we could consider some corridor that would take you into the restroom building, and then you could go through the restrooms, but I'm not sure if that's an elevated level of exit you're now going through. It's a type 1 construction, it's fully sprinklered. We could create a corridor from the screening room that has doors into this fire-rated passageway that takes you into the restrooms, but that would still put you into another building to pass through to exit.
Yeah. But it's, that building is directly to another, it's shorter to the exit, shorter distance to the outside, but it's not, it would solve you, maybe not having to make a corridor through the historic lobby.
Yeah, it is, I mean, it is a type 1 construction, so the structure is all rated 3 hours as well. So you'd kind of continue in the 3-hour rated enclosure by going that direction. Intuitively, it seems a little odd to egress everyone through the restroom stalls, but
Because one of
Well,
the sheets shows
it's an
that,
option.
yeah.
It may be odd, but it was approved previously.
Well, it's
kind
approved
of
for,
variance
it's
it.
approved for the
For one.
egress out of that building, which is just restrooms. So there's a foyer and restrooms in that portion of the building. So the egress is, if you're in the toilet room, you go out to the outside directly from there. It's not an egress approved to leave any of the other buildings and go through there. But it is the egress for that building and that portion of the building. And people that go to the screening room will need to be using those restrooms, so they will know where that is too. Because those will be the,
And the future means of egress is through the 616 building,
correct.
so you're still going through another building to the future.
You're
Yeah.
always doing that.
You're always doing that.
Yeah, you're always doing that,
Yeah.
no matter what we do. One, you're either going out one way of the building, the other you're going out another way of the building,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
could also be more confusing because you don't know what that other side of the building looks like. So you're probably going to go out the way you came in,
It's most common, yeah.
right?
Yeah, you're most familiar with that way.
Correct. The other two, the future two exit doors out of the screening room will put you into a continuous exit.
Completely new building, you have no idea
Continuous
if you're going to
exit
left or right.
passageway that you have no idea what you're doing until you follow the exit signs, because you will never have gone in there except for to exit in emergency situations.
Yeah, as Laura indicated, again, Glenn Dempsey, building official, as Laura indicated, the exiting, each building will have its own exiting, and it'll have its own signs to help guide the public out.
And that's part of the code requirement. And that's the tricky part of this intersection between 3 buildings is typically you don't go into another building on a property line. So now we're having 3 buildings kind of acting as one for the Michigan Theater.
And that's already been approved 100 times over again. If whenever something else wants to happen, we have to get a variance on, can we approve this because you're going over another building line? Right? I mean,
But please keep in mind, each building will have its own exiting requirements. It'll meet the code requirements. The inner workings are to allow access to some of the amenities, and that's why the fire doors were put in, so that if something happened, those doors would be shut down while the people were using the restrooms and so forth, so. But they each will have their own exiting, meeting code requirements.
so in event of a fire, in case of a fire now, those doors that go in and out of there would close and would be shut down? Or would those be, now have to stay open? Is that what, so if the fire alarm goes off, those doors would have to automatically close right now in case of a fire?
That is correct, and then you wouldn't have exiting out of the screen room.
Then you wouldn't have, then they'd be
If
trapped.
if your intention is allowing into the Michigan Theater.
Right.
You would not have any exiting.
So now, if there's a fire, if we allow this, they would actually have to rework those doors to stay open so people can actually exit.
The intention was to shut down, to separate the
To
uses.
separate 100%.
Separate the buildings, yes.
Typically, all the rated doors close on emergency, and then you still egress through them. They still all have panic
You can
pressure.
automatically close,
So
but you can still
those doors
egress
would
or-
want to close if there was a fire in either building, and you'd panic
just filter.
egress through them with the push bar. So none of the doors on property lines would lock in an emergency situation. You'd still be able to access them. They're just going to close so that the fire doesn't spread from one side to another.
And currently, you guys are just banking on the fact that the employees, the ticket sales are going to stop 49 people. Is there going to be like a presentation inside in case of an event and fire? This is the routes you have to take for this temporary basis over the next few months. Is that too much to say that almost like you're boarding a plane, here's your exit rows, you know? I've just,
Can you speak on behalf of the Michigan Theater?
Yeah, so in my discussions with Russ Collins, the director of the theater, he would be willing to do whatever his staff can do to effectuate safety. So if it's the direction of the board that there's a human being at the beginning of every theater showing, explaining, just as you said, the exit is here, the exit is there, I think he would be happy to do that and put it in a letter to commit to do it.
So as a reminder, again, the appeal was based on a misinterpretation of the code. We're not meeting the exiting requirements by code. It should have an exit to the exterior that allows the screen room, public, maintenance staff, whoever's in there, to get to a public way.
So if there was a way to extend the passageway to that bathroom core building that has an egress to the exterior, is that something that they could try drawing up and seeing if that would pass muster? Understanding that the occupancy issue is still an issue, that you have to, somehow, there have to be some guarantees or in place that the occupant load wouldn't exceed 49 no matter what. But if they could clean up the egress situation so that there was a contained exit from the screening room
To the exterior.
to the exterior, even if it's through that other building, would that fly?
So the passageway is supposed to take you directly to the exterior. It's not supposed to take you through other areas of the building.
but isn't that the future design
It would be
also?
a temporary treatment. It would be temporary, not permanent, so.
To answer your question, no, the 616 and the screen room, which is part of the 616 address, will have a proper exiting when everything's in place. Each building will have its own exiting ability. But the
Through
way it's-
another building though. But through another building though.
No, each building will have its own exit requirements met.
Okay.
616 and the screen room will have proper exits. They will not have to go into another building in the end result,
At the end of construction, but it's interim.
in the end of construction.
Yeah.
But going into another space is not does not meet the definition of a proper passageway.
One thing I know, one question was about the travel distances. I've never seen what the actual travel distances are. You're exceeding 200 or 250, but I haven't seen a number on here what all these travel distances add up to, all the way to an exit. Has that been calculated?
One of them, the shorter distance one that doesn't take the longer 3-hour corridor is 141 feet, and the other one's 211. So, from the worst-case scenario spot in the auditorium to
So
through those two doors.
pink to purple to green is 211? And then blue to
Green,
blue to green is 149 feet?
correct.
So both those
141.
things fall within the 200 limit of a non-sprinkled building. Both those would fall within the 200 feet of the unsprinkled building, for travel distance, it looks like.
So you have to keep in mind, the other part of the code is there may be a horizontal exit that meets an exiting requirement for a horizontal exit, but it can't be the only type of exit. The passageway takes you directly to the outside. There could be a second horizontal exit, or a second exit that is a horizontal exit, but it can't be the only exit.
So if you call this an exit, not a horizontal exit is going to be a fire-rated enclosure or an exit. Is this the travel distance, correct? Or common path to travel, we'd have the choice of 2 ways to get out?
So typically, your horizontal exit can be an exit when there's more than,
That is the exit itself. This horizontal exit is the exit. Once you get to enter the exit, horizontal exit, you are in the exit, correct?
a horizontal exit, a passageway
Brings you to an
exit.
exit.
Passageway exit takes you directly from a certain point to the exterior.
Yeah.
Horizontal exit could take you through various areas, but it can't be the only type of exit in this situation. So a passageway, you can look at the definitions there.
Yeah, and the horizontal exit puts you technically in a new building, so you can start your travel distances and everything over again once you pass a true horizontal exit. We were debating on, is that 3-hour wall between the Michigan Theater and the screening room considered a horizontal exit? Because then you could stop that path of travel calculation at that point and start over when you get into the Michigan Theater lobby. But as Glenn's saying, that's one exit, even though you're only required one exit and 49 occupants, the code does say that in the definition that a horizontal exit cannot be your only means of egress. You're coming out of 2 doors into a passageway. So there's 2 doors into the passageway, which is 3 hours, and then you're going through another 3-hour wall. So there's a high level of fire safety in that scenario where you're in a 3-hour enclosure before you get to that 3-hour wall, and then you're in a sprinklered lobby. But it is not the true definition of a horizontal exit, or doesn't comply with the true definition of a horizontal exit.
So if you look to the definition of exit passageway, that gives you how that works. It's a horizontal direction that gets you to the exit. So you can look at that, and then you can look at the requirements for a horizontal exit and exiting requirements. It's not allowed to be, a horizontal exit in itself cannot be the only way out. It has to have a
It's the second.
exit passageway.
And this is currently an issue because the construction's gone and going, so right now you're in the situation that you can't occupy the space, the screening room, or is the screening room currently occupied?
I do not know. Is the screening room? It's occupied. I think there's still open exits because we're building 630 but not 616 yet.
Yeah, so the foundation system, excavation and underpinning in the Michigan Theater, which all has to happen, isn't ongoing yet because there's still a part of an existing structure not yet demolished, which holds the bathrooms for the theater. So people are still using the screening room and the existing bathrooms. When the new bathrooms are commissioned and operable and we have a certificate of occupancy, that will allow the final demolition of the remaining structure, and then we can start the excavation and underpinning and all the foundation work. And it's that foundational underpinning and work which will block the other exits for the screening room. Board Member Cox mentioned, we are trying to do something that's not found in the code because it's a unique circumstance which doesn't exist except for a brief period of time in the construction where we want to keep the Michigan Theater open because nobody anticipated COVID when we started the project. There has also been supply chain issues, so whereas the project was originally engineered in steel and precast concrete plank, quicker, less shoring required. Now it's poured concrete, so you have this forest of shoring that has to be left in place as you begin to pour the concrete to let it set and harden for a longer period of time, which impairs the ability to put those tunnels egressing out of the screening room until we have enough curing time for those floors for that shoring to be pulled out. A whole confluence of things that nobody anticipated when we started the planning process. That's what's going on.
So when is that scheduled to end? The current exiting plan is you have, is it in the next couple of weeks, you're going to lose your second means of egress, or what is your timeline here?
I believe the dates we started was with October, so we're talking about starting in October, because we're gonna build that 3-hour wall within the Michigan Theater on the property line, within that corridor on the Michigan Theater property first. So that's in place first. So we're talking a couple months from now. And when we build that wall, the Michigan Theater will have to close the screening room because that will be under construction. I believe the construction timeline for that is a month or less. They're trying to get it to 2 weeks to build that wall.
If I might add one additional, just a note on this project. It's not uncommon in these type of projects to close down other areas of use until the construction is done. So while they want to leave it open and try to leave it open, it's not uncommon to shut them down during construction phases and then bring them back up when they can.
Do you have any questions or a motion from the board?
One last try here. What is the elevation situation between the existing screening room and the Michigan Theater itself?
About 4 feet from the low portion of the screening room. Maybe even more, 5? 4 feet. So the auditorium slopes up to the lobby, and then the lobby foyer on the kind of west side of the page has a ramp in that corridor that slopes up to the Michigan Theater. So it's like 2.5 feet in the auditorium of a ramp, and then another 2.5 feet or so in the corridor. We've looked at punching holes into the Michigan Theater.
Yeah?
But you kind of come into the foundation of the Michigan Theater because of where it is. So we'd have to drop, because the Michigan Theater actually slopes down, and there's a basement, and it's,
Oh, okay.
we don't really want to punch holes into the historic theater. We've definitely looked into that.
Okay.
And then you're also exiting into the theater, which is also which is currently and does not need to be sprinklered. So it feels like going through the sprinklered lobby would be a safer alternative, since it's intuitively the way that you'd enter the building.
I don't know if there's any benefit of, you're going to do more exploration, can you come up with other alternates? We can table it, or we can vote on it the way it is now, based on the discussion we had today.
could propose to temporarily resprinkle if allowed across the property line, the screening room and the hallway as an added measure.
Does that help our egressing? It helps safety, but does it help our egressing, I guess, is the concern we're trying to solve.
It's safer, gives you longer distance, but does not change the direct exit.
So you would change, you would be asking for an improved, the three reasons we can grant a variance are the code doesn't apply, or it's been misinterpreted, or you provide us equally or better. So what of those three would that fall underneath?
Be better.
I understand the construction sequencing of 616. When you look at the overall plan and there's a section that, along the Michigan Theater line that leads to the east or to the right on the plan toward Lane Hall. There's nothing that can be done to put a temporary passageway to the exterior along that wall?
It will be done that way. However, it cannot be done until they're up to the 5th floor, because there's 19 stories right there as well.
Why the 5th floor?
That'll give it time to cure, and they can remove the shoring.
So it's just because the shoring is not going to be removed in time? Because
Not
of cure
gonna-
time?
We can't remove it until it meets its ultimate strength.
What's your plans, 21 days?
But we've several floors, so that's where they've deemed that to be safe.
But you're looking at 21-day strength on the
Yeah,
concrete to remove the
correct.
floor.
It's also noted that the existing grade is about 3 feet lower than that exit to the screening room that goes directly into the Michigan Theater. So if we were to go out, we'd have to go downstairs if the building was not in place, as construction would go on. That's one of the difficulties, is the existing site and the screening room are at varied levels. So we can't just poke a hole and go, all right, we can go out this side, and then when we're working on construction, we go out this side. Because there's a pretty significant grade change. And as they try to level the site to put the other building in, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We've thought about this in a lot of ways, and this is kind of the best scenario that we have, is to go through a temporary, we'll call it 180 days approximately of construction, where we limit the number of occupants to have one exit. I would say that we're open to ideas that would make you feel comfortable approving this, whether it's changing the number of days, or I guess, I don't know how to go about this, but I do feel like going into a 3-hour enclosure within 75 feet with less than 49 occupants is a fairly secured fire safety. One exit is only required for 49 occupants. Once you cross the property line, you are in a different building. And the idea of a horizontal exit is when you're in a different building, the fire egress pass, all that starts over again. This is an unusual situation, but it's a temporary allowance during construction. Maybe there's some way in your review of the code that says this wouldn't be what you would approve for the final occupancy, but because it's a temporary means of egress for construction safeguards, is it safer to send people across the construction site, or is it safer to have them go back through the Michigan Theater lobby? Is, I guess, the concern that we're having is we feel it's unsafe to send them back through the shoring of the construction, because it doesn't meet the egress width. We won't be able to build walls and safety wide enough for people to egress through that until that shoring comes down.
So I guess either way, it's unsafe, right?
I don't know. Until the shoring's gone. I still think it would be, personally, I'd rather go through the Michigan Theater for all of construction than try to cross the construction site. If that's the way I came in, that's the way I'm going to try to leave, regardless of which direction the exit arrows show. Just as an occupancy means of egress. If I walk in the door, I'm going back out the door I came in. But that's not how the code works. It's just a user experience, so.
One last question, sorry. Is the completion of 630, is the completion of 630, that's the bathroom core for the screening room? But there are bathrooms in the Michigan Theater.
There are a few. It is not code compliant.
Not accessible, or you mean not code compliant for quantity or?
Both.
Yeah.
It's not accessible because they're on the second floor and there's no elevator. That's what the Cadillac building is serving now. So we cannot tear down the Cadillac building until the 630 restrooms are available. And then we will increase the.
So, all right, so let me ask this. Since all of this everything is contingent on everything else in this project, so suppose the 630 bathrooms weren't fully completed in one form or another, but there was a way to create a passageway from the screening room through the 630 building to the exterior. Since this is all a temporary situation, right, the bathrooms aren't completed just yet because it's a temporary situation. I don't know how you achieve the accessibility issue, but that hasn't been an issue apparently for the existing Michigan Theater. So I'm asking, is there some way that the timing of the completion of 630 could be structured in a way that you could get a direct passageway to the exterior?
I think you could come through those double doors, come into the Michigan Theater lobby, create a corridor directly into the 630 building that's fire rated for exit passageway, and then you'd exit through those restrooms, and we'd just need an access door into that corridor from the Michigan Theater so people could use the restrooms or get to the.
Use the restrooms that can be completed until, you can get the full switch over to make the screening room code compliant for egress.
The 630 restrooms will be complete before we start the foundations of 616. So the 630 restrooms will be complete and operational before we go to 49 occupants in the screening room.
Okay.
Because we'll have to tear down the Cadillac building to start the 616
Well,
foundation.
I guess that's my question. Is there some way to finesse the completion of the 630 bathroom core building, if you want to call it that, so that it can function as a true exit passageway during those 180 days or whatever it is that, we're debating whether the screening room can remain open or not?
I like your options. I like where your head's going. But I think the concern would be that we would have to shut down the Michigan Theater because then it would not be code compliant in its plumbing calcs, because we would be short 3/4 of the restrooms that are required for the Michigan Theater. If we didn't have,
But
because
the Michigan Theater has restrooms now?
In the Cadillac building. There's, I
Aren't there
believe,
restrooms on the second floor
I
of the
believe there's
Michigan
six.
Theater?
6 or 8 total restrooms, and I think they need somewhere around 20 per. You might know that math better than I do, but it's closer to 15 to 20 per men's and women's. So the Cadillac building right now has all of the restrooms that make the Michigan Theater code compliant in plumbing calcs. To build the 616 building, we're going to have to tear that building down, which is why we're building the restrooms in the 630 building.
I understand that.
From a time sequencing.
So, you know
Yeah.
what I'm really trying to suggest here
Just to
is
get to
some
it.
way of finessing all this temporary stuff so that the issue isn't a fire safety, a life safety issue. It's, I can't wait to go to the bathroom issue. I mean, it's another type of non-compliance, but it's not a life safety issue. It could accomplish, it might accomplish a way of getting the proper egress for a reduced occupancy in the screening room to happen, to let the screening room function through the whole construction period. The trade-off would be that they wouldn't be bathroom compliant. Is that clear?
That's clear.
Yeah.
Would the building department allow the Michigan Theater to be operational without accessible and up to the plumbing count? Correct?
I think you'd
plumbing
have,
count?
I think in order to get that approval, I would have to have you go to the State of Michigan Barrier-Free Design Board.
Yeah, because then they would be non-ADA compliant, because anyone that showed up that was accessible couldn't access the restrooms.
So that,
What
that's
about
correct.
the possibility of a temporary accessible bathroom?
The porta potty in the back alleyway?
Allowed in the building, I don't know.
We'd have to talk to the state plumbing code for that. That's not something that I think I could answer.
I think it's a reasonable question.
I mean, I understand, I'm fishing here, you know, but honestly, that's the only other way I see out of this. You know, basically, things that the confluence of all of these variables have basically painted you into a corner. So,
I might add, they could approach the state and ask for, see if they would allow that, but I don't believe anybody would give them an answer without it going in front of the board and their proposal being requested. So,
I mean, they are reducing the occupancy load to 49, so that reduces the fixture count to a certain point, but doesn't resolve the accessibility issue.
accessibility, and even the number of bathrooms.
If you're going
So-
from 250 to 49, you're probably reducing some stalls, but you still need accessible ones.
Yeah, you have a business there that's operating, it might not be 6 months, it might be a month, but it might be more than 6 months. And so then, during that time frame, the inadvantaged cannot go because, or they may have a problem if they have to go and they don't have access. So that would have to go to the state of Michigan.
If we could, we prefer that if we could be tabled for a month, to come back with a different approach, similar to Commissioner Hart was talking about.
I could support that, I
Yeah,
really could.
Can I ask one question? Have you looked at using more rapid setting concrete for your first 5 floors, so you can pull the forms faster?
I don't think we have.
Again, that's something, if we're tabling next month, we'll ask the contractor what the options are.
Because, I mean, I've been on projects we use 7-day concrete, we pull the forms in 7 days, routinely.
We'll definitely ask that.
And a motion to table it for 1 month?
Yes. What's the, which variance number is this?
It's the second one in, so EBA 22.
Oh, okay. I move that in the matter of BBA 22-2002 variance appeal for 616 East Washington, Ann Arbor, Michigan, that the matter be tabled for a period of 1 month until our next hearing.
I second that.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No, it passes. It's tabled till August meeting.
It's a very sticky situation.
Are we adjourned?
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Oh, yeah. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.